Okay. 3, 2, 1, go.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Triad of the Force podcast, a podcast from three Puerto Rican friends coming together to do deep dives into Star Wars and other nerd-related media. This is season 2, episode 4, and if you guys listen to us, or if you don't, now you know. Our first episode of this season, we had MC Gould over, and we had the chance to talk about those first 3 episodes of WandaVision. So now that we're at episode 6, we thought it would be appropriate to give it another analysis. And before we get to that, we have a guest joining us today as well. So Goose, why don't you introduce us?
We have the wonderful Catrina from the podcast Bantha También. So welcome, Catrina, to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm a really big fan, so I'm very excited to be here.
Awesome. And we heard that you have another podcast now too, so.
Yes, just launched. So I've got Bantha También with my friend Kayla, where we talk about pop culture and Star Wars from a Latinx point of view, very much like this one. And we're like sister podcasts. I like that. And then the other one just started with my friend Rachel Leishman. It's called PascalPod because we're very creative. And we every week we go every other week we go a little bit through the filmography of iconic Chilean American actor Pedro Pascal. So it's been super fun. We've got our first episode out where we covered Triple Frontier. So if you guys want to go check it out, you can.
We will definitely leave links to in the description, so that people can definitely go and check that out. But before going into more details about some of these other projects that you're doing, I just wanted to kind of shout out how we got to know you. It was obviously Mo was with you on the Geeky Waffles podcast where you guys were analyzing the last episode of The Mandalorian, and we absolutely loved your personality and like some of your points of view that you had to about your takes about all of the Mandalorian and whatnot. We were like, well, this is definitely a person that we want to talk to. So thank you so much for joining us. And again, like we were saying before off air, for having the patience to, or it's kind of some scheduling issues. It was supposed to be our Valentine's Day episode, but now it's a day late Valentine's episode. So
it's kind of the President's Week holiday.
Exactly.
I grew up in Miami, and we have a very specific way of telling time, and that's when we get there, it's time.
Exactly.
Yep.
And appreciate that.
Exactly. Like Gandalf would say in the Fellowship, the wizard is never late, nor is he early. Exactly. He arrives precisely when he means to.
It happened when it needed to, so I'm happy with it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So let's get into you a little bit. Why don't we? I mean, this is our usual kind of questionnaire for everyone that we're having here. So one of the main things that we always like to ask somebody is like, since we are a Star Wars focused podcast and we did get to know you through Star Wars and The Mandalorian, one of our first questions always is like beyond like your background and what you have been doing. It's like, how did you get into Star Wars? Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I was at a Star Trek convention in
Blasphemy.
In 1991. I was in a Star Trek convention with my dad because he couldn't find a babysitter. And so I was toddling around unsupervised, as kids in the 90s do. And I stumbled across a vendor with some top Star Wars cards with Han Solo and Chewbacca on the cover. I asked my dad to buy those for me, and he was thrilled. And I asked him what it was about, and we went home and watched Star Wars. So it was
nice.
Conventions. It was Star Trek that led me to Star Wars.
But in an extremely cute way.
That's definitely the best way to get into Star Wars. I love that it was Han and Chewie.
Yes. My forever loves. Like I love Han and Chewie so much, and like
arguably the best couple of Star Wars.
Yeah, the best couple, the best dynamic duo, the best friends. Like I love them so much because there's just so much like, I don't know, you can always tell that even though Chewie is like, he's more of the provider in the relationship, like he's the emotional foundation who is rational because he's been around for hundreds more years than Han has.
Yes.
So he has a little idea of like what's going on. But like I just love that like they're both in their own ways really supportive of each other. Like Chewie tells Han what's rational, what's not. Han rushes in and causes fires if Chewie gets in trouble. So
pretty much sums it all up.
Yeah, exactly. And so I've been into Star Wars like ever since. I dressed up for the prequels. I just like, it's been my life, and somehow it led me to writing about Star Wars for a bunch of different outlets like Sci-Fi and The Wire, and for the official Star Wars blog, which was like the most amazing thing in the world. I should really pitch.
Sounds amazing. Yes.
It was good. It was super fun. So I have a couple articles there, and then that led me to working on a great little show called Looking for Leia. Got it.
Which we were gonna seg into. Obviously, we want to know a lot more about that, because that's definitely a big deal, and it's actually perfect way to jump into that. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about that? It's a big deal. Obviously, it was on the Sci-Fi 8-part miniseries, if I'm remembering correctly. How did you get involved with it? Like, why don't you tell us a background about it and your involvement with it, and what you hope to have done through it?
Definitely. Yeah. I was aware of the project before I joined it, and a really big fan. I was always retweeting their Kickstarter and their crowdfunding campaigns. And then when it came time to to finish production and to finish all of our interviews and get all of those pickups, Annalise Ophelian, the creator and producer, contacted me and asked me to do a little social media, and then somehow that unfolded into me doing a lot more than social media, and joining the project as the assistant producer. And it was just the coolest, safest, most positive on-set experience I've ever had. Like, everyone was taken care of, from like, our guests to like us. And it was amazing, because it was such a little, like, I don't want to say it was a little project, but in comparison to a lot of TV shows, it doesn't have a lot of the corporate funding. Like, it was almost entirely it was almost entirely funded by Star Wars fans, and so it meant a lot to me. And so Looking for Leia is a docuseries about Star Wars fans who are not often in docuseries. I still can't pronounce it because I haven't said it in real life, but I believe it's BIPOC. And other marginalized folks, and women and non-binary folks, who we just wanted to know what made them love Star Wars so much. And it unfolded into this like rich and beautiful history lesson that I love how the first episode starts with like stories that we tell. So it goes back to like the people in the 70s, our original fanfic foremothers and fathers and parents, who created zines and like were so into Star Wars and telling stories about Star Wars. And it just meant a lot to me, because it's like, oh, we write fics and create zines now too. And it's because of these folks who also came from the Star Trek fandom. So yeah, and then like the whole series is just this like beautiful exploration of how people express themselves and attach themselves to this like incredible story. So I'm very proud that I got to work on it. I'm very happy that I got to travel while we were producing it, because we shot in LA, we shot in New York, and we just went like all around the country, and I was very lucky to be part of one of those units. So yeah, I loved it.
That sounds amazing. And again,
sounds awesome.
Congratulations.
Yes.
You did mention one thing that I found interesting, especially like seeing like current state of like Star Wars, at least in the discourse that we have like, online and whatnot, is that you felt that the production was one of the more safe environments, the most positive places, which I find interesting because of how Star Wars is at least perceived in the community at large, about it being a divisive fandom, and kind of having people within it that might not have the most quote unquote Star Wars morals, if so to speak, right? So I don't know if you had any thoughts about that, having been involved in a production that was that was fostering positivity and inclusivity, and then seeing what's happening like on this other side with particular people that are opposed to those kind of ideals. I don't know if you had any thoughts that you could share with us about that.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is something that I think whenever I like encounter ugliness on the internet, I think that like, in over the course of production of Looking for Leia, we interviewed like 100+ people. Annalise was hitting like Star Wars Celebration on the ground at both Chicago and Anaheim to get as many people to talk on this as possible. We have like so much extra footage, so if we get picked up, hopefully that can go into a season 2, because it was amazing and so grounding, I think, and hugely reassuring to know that all these people that we're interviewing have so much like love in them, not even just for Star Wars, but just like these are folks who are like so empathetic and like so willing to share Star Wars with others. So every time I encounter all this like nastiness on the internet, it's just like I think about the people we interviewed. I think about their faces and their stories, and it's like like this isn't all so bad. There are just like these people who are ugly on the internet but would not fight me in real life, because they, like I feel like poison, when it's not weaponized so heavily, cannot affect you stronger than like the joy that people in Star Wars fandom can bring you, which is kind of abstract to say, I'm sorry, but like there's always a lot more good than the very, very loud bad. And it's what I hold on to whenever like all the bad shows up, which is like once or twice a week, There are still people who remember what this series is about, and that's what's important to me.
Anyway, so for anyone listening, sorry if there is a jump in our conversation, but there were some technical issues that have hopefully been resolved. But we are back. So Katrina, you were mentioning your work on Looking for Leia, and that led us to talk a little bit about fandom and the current state that's in, based on like the dialogue you were having based on Looking for Leia. But talking about a different side of fandom, you get like the more professional side with Looking for Leia, but then there's the more personal side, right, with your podcast, both of your podcasts that you have. Your podcast is called Bantha También, which obviously is a clever pun, right? And not just like Star Wars lore, but like Hispanic filmmaking. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that? Like where, obviously we know a bit about the inspiration for the title, but for those of us that are listening and aren't familiar, why don't you tell us about the title of your podcast? What's it about, and your focus with it? And then obviously we'll talk about the Pedro Pascal one as well.
We started the podcast when you guys weren't around yet, because we noticed that lack of that voice in Star Wars fandom, and now we have this like beautiful, robust Latinx voice in Star Wars fandom with your podcast and with so many great blogs and stuff. But I started it because Kayla and I were just talking about Star Wars. We love it so much, and like it was a really big, important thing to us. And I was like, this conversation is pretty cool. Do you want to like make it a podcast? Which I guess is like how a lot of podcasts start, especially between friends. And I thought it was I love Kayla's thoughts on Star Wars, and I just wanted to broadcast them to the world. So we are not necessarily like on a schedule. We like when we have a subject to talk about, we produce the show and make it, because Kayla and I are both full-time employed. Kayla's a full-time mom, so we try to be really easy.
That's a job. Yep.
Yeah,
that's a whole job.
That's like 3 jobs in one. Yep.
Angel of a child, though. Love her kid. He's so cool. He's the coolest kid in the world. And so like, we do it on our own time, but we also make sure that like these conversations are really deep and important. And like I have a really special place in my heart for that podcast because of the room I think that we kind of made, in a way. It was like, there's nobody like us in Star Wars podcasting yet, so let's carve it out. And so that's kind of where it all came from. And I'm very proud that we're still running today. And yeah, now I've got this like Pedro pod, which is amazing and super fun. And we're gonna be talking about the first episode of The Mandalorian in our next episode. So please do stay tuned for that.
Yes.
Yeah. So I like, especially after one of the big things that we talk about on Bantha También are the Hispanic and Latinx influences in Star Wars, both in front of and behind the camera. Like we'll talk about everyone from Bail Organa to Pablo Hidalgo, and how all these people changed Star Wars in these impactful ways that don't necessarily get recognized. So it's very, very special to me.
I always like to make it meta in the sense of like not only looking at Latin representation within Star Wars, but also within fandom. Because I have my opinions about how Latin representation is welcomed in particular parts of fandom. Obviously, I mean, it's not the same if we're talking about like the fandom in Mexico or in Spain, which obviously it's wildly different, right, than being an English-speaking podcast in the United States trying to represent the Latin voice. So what has been your perspective with a Latin-focused podcast within the Star Wars community?
I mean, it's really like how it was talking to my friends about Star Wars growing up. Not all of my friends are Latinx, but a lot of us, we were in Miami. So I was very often the whitest person in the group. And I like it that way because it really opens, like I have my experience. I don't really, I mean, I hate to say like, I don't need more because obviously you always need more experience. You're always learning, but like, I feel like it was really foundational to me and the way I understood Star Wars from a very young age. And if I didn't have everybody around me that was, different, I feel like I wouldn't understand it or even appreciate it the way I do now. So yeah, so I think like, and now that I have that understanding, it's really great to have fans and fans, Star Wars fans around the country. My friends.
I like that one more.
I like that.
Is on this. She leads a Brazilian podcast called Cast Wars with her friends, and it's been fun because I've been like slowly learning Portuguese through them. Which is
that's cool. Very cool.
It is
very cool.
A very cool, beautiful language, and listening to them is just like it's really interesting. Like seeing how they consume stories as opposed to like a very Americanized audience. And what affects them rather than like what affects Joe and Bob on the Star Wars Joe Bob podcast,
Exactly.
So it's really cool. Like I feel like this fandom is so huge and expansive, and like there are Japanese Star Wars fans, there are fans in France who like Star Wars, and there's this different way of like consuming this story that was very intricately about like American capitalism, if you think about it. So I think it's really important to like keep your eyes and ears open to round the world Star Wars fans.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think. Sorry, Mom. I cut you up there.
No, I was just saying, like, agreeing with Catrina that. Yeah, you just the more diverse, the better it gets. Like
I consider myself very lucky to have grown up in a city that like is indeed so diverse, and also awesome. I love Miami.
And also awesome.
I miss Miami, but I won't go back there now.
Yeah.
Especially now.
Maybe later.
Maybe later.
Yeah, maybe this exact same time in a year.
Yeah.
I'd be infinitely safer.
Exactly.
So we've talked. I think we've covered a lot about like what you have been doing. I don't know if like we wanted to talk a little bit more about your Pedro Pascal podcast, because this is turning out to, people have been saying the year of Pedro Pascal, but I would disagree and just say that this is turning out to be the decade of Pedro Pascal, because he's coming like a train and he ain't stopping. Ever since Game of Thrones, it's like it's just kept magnifying itself. Some people are getting fired and he just keeps getting hired.
That was just like the best like 1-2 punch of a day. I'm just like, yes, he just keeps winning. He just can't lose. Yeah,
He's killing everybody with kindness. That's the best way.
Exactly. He's just a good person. Like it's and it, when you are a celebrity and you like make the world know you're a good person, that makes you more likable and easier to work with, and like, you know, people hire you. So yeah,
it doesn't hurt to be extremely handsome though.
Yeah, there's definitely that. And I just have like so much, like I feel like it's almost undue pride, but it is a lot of pride because like his story, you know, it mirrors a lot of like stories of different Chilenos who, you know, immigrated to this country during Pinochet. And so to me, it's like, it's not just reflect, because he's not the only one I know. You know, there are other people who speak about it very openly. Pablo's one of them. He's an immigrant from that time. And so having Pedro on this massive national stage, getting all this recognition and love, it's just like my cousin.
Exactly.
You know, and like it's been great because it's like made the rest of my family into Star Wars fans, and so it's not just me and my dad being nerds. Everybody watches The Mandalorian, and thankfully Mando serves.
I know one person who's not going to be watching Mandalorian from now on.
Yes,
I'm not gonna name names, but she knows who she is.
Garbage Camino, yeah. Someone's not gonna be watching. You know, she's, I don't know, too busy making terrible movies with, you know, screenwriters. But
she thinks she's the rebellion now. So
she doesn't know what a rebellion looks like. No, it's just like it's good to see. It's good to see him like thriving in the face of all of that, thriving in the face of like, you know, I wouldn't say that this is like the first time that like people have tried to stop Pedro Pascal from being successful, specifically because he is like a Latinx man. And I'm sure he's encountered a lot. Look at how long he's been working and how long it's taken him to rise to national superstardom. And it's been nice. And like, he's got so much work under his belt that like, I know this podcast can run for as long as we want it to. And it's cool to like, I mean, I've never done an actor focused podcast or a director focused podcast, but I've listened to a lot of them and I'm a really big fan of a lot of them. And so it's nice to have this excuse to like watch Pedro Pascal like every week.
Of course.
Talk about it with my friends.
Yeah, now I have to do it, you know, just to have to do.
Now it's work.
It's work. No, it's I have to do sacrifice of.
Exactly. It's my assignment, my responsibility.
Yes. And that is not a bad way to spend some time.
No.
Can't complain.
Absolutely not.
it's not. I mean, he's fantastic all around. But I think to keep diversifying like a conversation, what I think it's also interesting to know that we can, surprisingly to maybe some people, know that we are fans of more than one thing. Star Wars is not the only thing that we focus on. We also, specifically for this episode, wanted to talk about the MCU. And like Nani was saying, like at the beginning of the intro, we had done like a 3-episode review of WandaVision. And that was a good point to keep going with our reviews since we are at the 6th episode mark. So WandaVision, to kind of recap what we were talking before, is a show that like all 3 of us have been like enjoying a lot. Before we get into like discussion of last 3 episodes, Katrina, why don't you give us like your thoughts on like WandaVision and where it's at and what it represents for the MCU?
I love how weird it is. Like it really surprised me because I'll be honest with you, like, you know, I've always loved Wanda, but MCU Wanda took a little while for me to hook onto. There are a lot of things about her casting and her character that really put me off. And you know, it's not like I don't like Elizabeth Olsen. She's a fabulous actress, as we see in this show. But yeah, I had a couple chips on my shoulder. I still do, but not necessarily regarding how the show was made or how good it is, because it's freaking amazing. It's so different from Marvel shows. I muted myself. I'm so excited.
It's better than what happened to me.
I just like slammed my hands down and the space bar goes, no, Yeah, it's one of those shows that like we're not given so often in the Marvel universe. It's about a woman's grief, which so since when was that allowed? Like in any MCU movies, like we see like so many women either if they're not fridged, they have a reason to be sad, a huge loss in their lives. And so I'm glad that we get to see this huge, like kind of like beautiful and artistic expression of what Wanda's grief looks like. Because that's what the show is about. Like, what does it look like to grieve and perhaps even be manipulated in your weakness? So yeah, I really loved it. And it's so weird and cool. And I love all of the details put into like each era of a sitcom. Like it's just been so well crafted, and I'm so glad that like Jack Schaefer is the one show running this, because man, what a great show. I did not expect to like it so much.
Yeah.
It was always interesting coming into it because I know it was announced more or less at the same time as Falcon and the Winter Soldier. And for some reason, just like the concept of WandaVision always appealed to me more, because I'm like, well, not to say that Falcon and Winter Soldier will be bad necessarily. I think it will be good because Marvel usually does things well. But the fact that WandaVision just seems so unique in its concept and its framing device, I was like, well, this I think is what we need more of in storytelling, just things that are just inherently unique. And not to say that like everything that has a gimmick will necessarily be good, but you know, something that has its uniqueness and creativity and honesty in storytelling just makes it that much more compelling. So definitely agree. I think that there are some people I've seen from some of the discourse online that some people just don't get it. They think that the sitcom part of it is that they're pushing it too hard, even though that's kind of like the point of the show. So I don't know if we want to like Nani Mo, if you want to like give us like your thoughts on like the last 3 episodes, since like there were some bombshell revelations there with this one particular character returning. So why don't we just talk about that in a little bit more detail before kind of going more into the nitty gritty of the rest of the show? Because I think you just watched this earlier today.
Yeah. I watched episode 6 this afternoon. It's so good. I remember when the trailer first came out, and I was thinking, oh, it looks so weird and fantastic. I don't think they're actually gonna make the show that weird. It's just for the trailer, and then it might fall flat, and it didn't. It's just fantastic. At first, I thought they jumped the gun a little bit with explaining so much in episode 4, because I really liked that whole not knowing what was happening, if it really was Wanda or not. And then I think they explained too much, but then you keep getting more questions in the last few episodes. So maybe it wasn't the wrong decision to do that then, because then obviously you got that perspective from the outside, and you get to bring people like Darcy, who's awesome, and so when I first saw it, I was like, oh, they jumped the gun. It's like, it's 9 episodes and they're doing this already in episode 4. No. And then I thought maybe they were going to like walk away from the whole episodic sitcom thing. But when they came back in season 5 and continued it, I was like, okay, I'll let it go. It's awesome. And I, like you were saying, the way that it's framed, I absolutely love the intros to every episode.
Oh, yeah. I love that they went out of their way to like get someone to write the era appropriate music.
Yeah, it's so good. And then you get those commercials too that just drop little hints of like what's going on, and so keeps you on your toes. It's fantastically acted and scripted. And then obviously the bombshell, which we will get into later, that for me was just like, what? Oh my god. And I still have no idea where they're really going with it. So
exactly,
it was really well done. Yeah. So that's my 2 cents for now. So somebody else.
Yeah, I think I love like what everybody has said, like how weird it is, how different in itself what it's doing. It's also very meta, like it's aware of itself, like while not trying not to. But I think it's like, you finally get a show that is exploring like the mental psyche of people, which is like what stories has like part of it has always been like how do you tell somebody else. Like I love that scene where Wanda's like explaining to the kids like, yeah, you can't bring back the dead, while at the same time like trying to justify, and the way we all do that, like we all create this like realities within our heads that influence the externals, and just seeing that interplay, but with like, you know, these characters, they can actually manipulate reality. It's not just oh, I'm feeling sad and everything around me looks sad. It's like I am legitimately grieving, and then everybody around me is gonna grieve by just the notion of the power of the mind. I think it's very important. Like they're how, I guess, tying it back to like Qui-Gon, your focus determines your reality. That's what we're seeing, how we all create our own realities, and as long as they can survive and sustain themselves within your reality and my reality, but if the moment one overtakes the other, then what happens? That's then you see the existential dread, that what's like Vision going through, what every other character that's Vision has tapped into, like I'm still doing this because my mind somehow is wired to do a certain command, but I'm still suffering. Like it reflects a lot on the idea of like, I love that it's in the suburbs, like, oh, if you live in the suburb and you have a job and you follow what's been laid out, you should be happy, but everybody's suffering inside. Like it's so aware of those little details, and to play it with the TV, which is like how we all consume pretty much everything. I mean, we do have books, but let's face it, like at least in the US and the Western world, we all consume most things through the TV. That's our main input for, or a screen. It could be like a computer, it could be a phone, but that's what creates our reality. So the fact that one that uses those mediums to create the reality, I don't know, I think it's still mind-blowing. And then
it is.
And then the fact is that you can alter your reality. Then you bring back your twin brother with a different face. You recast your twin brother. Like
recasting
your subconscious is also equally as powerful. You don't you're not aware of everything that's going on. Like so many things are going in the back of our heads that just all of a sudden like a thought pops up, an idea pops up. Now we don't know where that came from, but just because we're not aware, it doesn't mean it's not happening. I think that's like how I love how deep it is in that sense.
Yeah, I think things that you and Katrina have said, that you know, it's the treatment of how they deal, you know, with grief, and you knew almost from the beginning that there's either she hijacked the town or there's some sort of manipulation. But now in these last few episodes, and you can tell that everybody in there is like drowning in her grief. It turns to this like just dark, emotional, just I don't know. It's so good. But anyway, other thoughts, Katrina?
Yeah, I mean, you talked a little bit about the theme songs, and I just love how, if you pay attention to those lyrics, it literally spells out Wanda's state of mind in that episode. You know, the kids are singing it in this episode, but it's still Wanda's perspective. So I just love little details like that, like the commercial about Lagos. How like when you made a mistake you didn't mean to make, and I was like, oh, I mean, like how Wanda blew up that building in Lagos. Like, I love those little connectors of like it isn't just Vision she's grieving, you know, it is Pietro, it is those people that she killed, you know, like she feels there's so much guilt and grief in Wanda, and like I love the way it's being told. Like it's a very respectful, I think, way to explore it. So yeah, I just I love it. And like the moment they brought in Evan Peters as Pietro, I like lost my mind, because that he is like the reason I like Days of Future Past, you know.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, to make a comparison, which cameo was more shocking to you at this point? Luke Skywalker, Mandalorian, or Evan Peters, Quicksilver, WandaVision?
I will say Evan Peters is Quicksilver, because at the beginning of season 2 of The Mandalorian, when you know, Din went and said like, oh, I've got to find a teacher for my kid, my only fear was like, oh no, what if he ends up with Luke Skywalker at the Jedi Academy? Like, I know what happens there.
Yeah.
So that was my first. I tweeted and I was like, no, Mando, don't take Yodito to the Jedi school. Don't do it. So I did expect like either Luke or, you know, I guess someone who works there.
Luke's secretary.
Luke's teacher's assistant. You know. Yeah.
Exactly. It's TA.
TA.
I'm still not a Jedi. I'm just a TA.
Exactly. So I kind of expected Luke. I didn't know how they would do it. I think they did it really well. But yeah, he was definitely not as much of a surprise as like, you know, X-Men Pietro showing up.
Because I did not. I obviously the idea it floated through my mind, but like Luke would say, but it was like a fleeting glimpse, like a shadow. I was like, Marvel's they're not gonna pull the trigger and bring Evan Peters, which kind of leads me to wonder, I know everyone's thoughts about this, and not to steal Wanda's thunder because it's her show, but bringing back Quicksilver, and especially the way that they did it, is pretty consequential, especially in terms of like framing it through how she's working out the things she's going through in her manifestations in the town. So what does it mean for her to not just bring back Quicksilver? What does it mean to bring him back as Evan Peters? Like, is that just the meta casting as fan service for us, or does that actually mean something to her, or is that just a way for them to start bridging the gap with the Fox X-Men universe?
Yeah,
or is it something else?
I think it's like multiple things. Like obviously the fan service was really cool. Like it was kind of Marvel and Disney showing us like, yeah, we got the contracts. Like we can do this. Like I don't know how much else they can do, but they can do that much. But I also feel like every person in the town was originally like there. Like they were a resource in a way to craft this new persona that they take on. So I'm wondering if like this Pietro was the Peter of, you know, the X-Men universe, and in her grief she wanted Pietro back, but she didn't want to have to look at his face, you know. She didn't want to have to, it was hard enough, you know, for her to see him dead this episode. So like I feel like a part of her was like, I really want him back, especially now that I have these twins, but like I can't deal with the trauma of looking at his face. And that's why, you know, Wanda or whatever is, you know, controlling Wanda, or you know, making this happen for Wanda, pulled that Pietro from another place, and it was like it's still him, but I don't have to suffer looking at him.
Yeah.
Well, what do you think?
Well, I don't know. It's interesting. I have like a lot of things floating in my head. I agree with Catrina. I think that's probably like what is happening. You know, you can't deal with facing your actual dead brother, especially your twin brother, which I'm no twin, but I can even imagine, like, if you're so connected psychologically and emotionally to this person from growing from ever, the fact that your other half in a way is missing, that it could, I'm pretty sure they could be placed that way, like how much then you cannot see, you can't even envision their face, and time has passed. So as time passes, we also, our memories become faded. There's a lot of how, like, imagine just even being there and through all those fights and seeing so many people dying, like just by that, like Wanda's dealing with war PTSD, and on top of every other, like if I'm misremembering, there wasn't like a scene where like they were in like jailed when they were kids, like I don't know, like they were experimenting on them or something. So one has never had a happy life, and then through Vision she is able to craft, even if it was just a few years, a reality where she was happy, which she was actually having something that's her own being shared with somebody else, but it's her reality. So now creating her own reality back again from scratch, then you just recast things because you misremember, you have to deal with the trauma. But if my crazy mind then looking at, I think we're like dealing with the fact that one that created that reality, she's also tapping into multiverse realities. It's almost like if you in order to sustain multiple realities within a same universe, then that means there has to be some kind of like wormhole thing opening up, or some multiverse convergence, and maybe that's where they're heading at. Like, will this open up like all the Marvel universes crashing together? Like, well, we already know Doctor Strange is called Madness, the Multiverse of Madness.
Multiverse of Madness,
we know, we talked about that. There's a possibility of different Spider-Mans getting together. Like, it'll be really interesting if, and I will freak out and geek out about it, that if the way to enter multiverses is through the mind and like breaking reality through, once you break your mind, which is like, will be what as a society we need. We're very safe, but how can you break past your own minds, past your own griefs, past your own fears, and actually see what's in front of you? So I don't know, I'm excited for that possibility.
Yeah, I think they're opening up a lot of possibilities with that. But the Pietro thing, I'm still not 100% sure what's going on there, because when he first showed up, I was like, okay, so they brought him from the X-Men. But then in this last episode, he does that line where it's like, I was shot like a chump in the streets, which was a great line.
Oh, yeah. Amazing line. Yes.
But he remembers dying as that Pietro. But then he has conversations with her about like when they were kids, and she's like, I don't quite remember it that way. And then you have that whole like, what happened to your accent? And him saying it back to her, what happened to yours? So you have these discrepancies, and then you have this guy who just showed up conveniently, and he knows everything about what's going on. I remember as soon as the episode came up, I was like, wait, didn't Vision just point out in the previous episode, like, where are the kids? And then because you have the Halloween episode, there's like kids everywhere. And he says to Wanda, like, I'm assuming the kids were just safely tucked in bed this whole time, So he knows what's going on. So I don't know if he didn't get pulled in by Wanda. Maybe he was put in by somebody else who's doing this manipulation. And there's the possibility of him being actually being the mutant X-Man, but his brain being rewired by being pulled in here. Because there was that also, when at the beginning, they said Pietro Maximoff as himself, which I thought was a weird way to show it. So I don't know, but it would be super cool because, I mean, the Pietro from X-Men knows that he's a mutant, and not, this experimented on version. He knows he's the son of Magneto, which opens up all these, possibilities for it to happen. He knows he's Quicksilver, not just this guy without a name, and that Wanda's Scarlet Witch, and all of these things. Which, by the way, this last episode with the costumes were so
amazing. Yep.
Good. It was so good.
So good.
I loved how they nailed the whole Halloween episode. It was like they had like the scary parts, they had like the whole like vibe. I was like, if only this was aired on Halloween, it would have been perfect.
Yep, it would have been perfect.
I know.
Yep.
I'm rewatching it on Halloween this year.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, definitely. It's gonna become one of my Halloween favorites now. It was so good.
Yeah. I loved it a lot. There's like one scene that stood out for me in the trailer where this week's episode was very Malcolm in the Middle, but there is still a lot of like really big visual references in the way it was shot. When Vision is going up that street to go toward unknowingly Ellis Avenue, that hill and that shot is like word for word, like from that one ET scene where Elliot and ET are going trick-or-treating. So I love little things like that are really nuanced, and like, not to speed us too heavily speeding too heavily in the next conversation, but like I am so excited for, and also terrified for Billy and Tommy. Yeah, I almost said Teddy. I'm like, we're not there yet. For weeks, and I think Mo can speak to this. Like, I've been talking about the Young Avengers being on this show forever. I am really excited. Like, it was even before the show when they cast, they have America being cast now, and Kate is going to be in Hawkeye, and all these like the Skrull are still a big part of the MCU. We saw them mentioned on Woo's board before. So I really think like everyone's very much excited about this phase, but I'm excited about the next one where we get the Young Avengers and Kamala and everybody, and then and Photon. I'm really excited about Photon / Captain Marvel.
Which Marvel keeps getting like the name drops during the show too, and like clearly something happened there, which is why oh my god, what's her first name in the show? I forgot.
Monica.
Monica, thank you. Monica apparently and Captain Marvel have some sort of falling out that sorry, I'm gonna ignore that point of thought completely, just because of what you were mentioning about Young Avengers and whatnot. It's the whole foreshadowing that Darcy did by mentioning that Monica's genetic makeup or DNA or whatever is being reassembled every time she goes through the hex, which is kind of opening the door for her to become her superhero alter ego from the comics, who, for the love of God, I can't remember what the name is, but they are doing a lot of setup for a post-Avengers universe or a co-Avengers universe that can live in tandem with it. I think it's also very, very exciting, which will again lead to our second part of our conversation going forward. But my concern with the kids and Quicksilver is their grasp on reality, because like what Mo was saying, was that everyone in the town is a real person, and everyone has been assigned the role that based already on someone being pre-existing. Even Vision, he was reassembled. He existed. He's there. He's just reanimated. So the fact that Quicksilver's around, is like, who is Quicksilver? Because I have obviously been wrong before.
Yeah.
Like all my theories are always wrong. So grain of salt. But for me, like, Quicksilver can't be Quicksilver. Like either X-Men Quicksilver or Age of Ultron Quicksilver. I just think he's either, I don't know if it's like a projection of Wanda herself, or if the theories of like someone doing this to Wanda are true, then that person's like feeding that into her. Because otherwise, like, his characterization doesn't make sense either, because he's like too quirky and funny to be the Quicksilver of the MCU, despite the recasting. So like, I don't know, Quicksilver is like the biggest question for me at this point, even though I prefer to be wondering if Vision was alive. Now my question is like, who is Quicksilver? Because Quicksilver can't be Quicksilver, at least in my mind. But who knows? Maybe they'll pull a 180 and it is X-Men Quicksilver and he'll be back.
Yeah, I mean, that does feed a lot into like, who, in a way, who are Billy and Tommy, and like, are they, because I know how things go in the comics. So it's going to be really interesting to see how the kids are handled in this one, because clearly they are not people who were in this town before, or it's, if they were, it's a really big secret and they've been aging themselves up, but like they do.
But they might be real, because we do know that Vision and Wanda, they did what adults do the episode before. Yeah.
Vision's genetics scare me. But yeah, they clearly have their own idea of what's going on. They know what their mom is doing. And like they developed their powers this episode, which is so exciting for me to see. Like when Billy like had his moment, I was like, oh, that's wicked. So I mean, we're without a doubt, I think we're getting Young Avengers. When? Who knows? But this is definitely a very big, strong, powerful introduction to that, because Billy plays such a huge part, because Tommy's story is like really tragic in the comics. I'm just, I just hope they're okay.
At least for now.
For now.
Yeah, well, for anybody who has read the comics, Quicksilver's little comment calling them demon spawn.
Demons. Yeah,
really hit me, because I was like, oh,
me too. I was like, I think they're going there. Yep.
I'm terrified.
Little demon spawn.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I thought this last episode was so visually stunning, because then you have all the old school outfits were so fantastic, and then you have that scene when Vision's breaking through the hex, and when you see him like re-disintegrate. I'm just kind of yelling at the TV like, oh my god, somebody help him, just like I forgot her name.
Oh, Darcy.
Like just like Darcy, like somebody please help him. Like I was helping her yell as well. It's like, can you not see this is just, it hit home so badly, and like, when he starts like falling to the ground again, it's like, oh my god, we have to watch this again. No, why? Why are they doing this to me? But it was fantastic. And then how you see how fast she expands that hex, how powerful she is. Like, I don't.
And I love that she turned all the military people into
a
clowns.
circus.
I see what you did there.
That was great. That was fantastic. It's like, wow. That was really good. That was really good. But yeah, it's visually stunning. There's already, we're already at episode 6. I'm so sad. I want more. But they managed to do so much in short episodes that I don't understand why some people don't get it or call it boring or something. I think it's super engaging. I think it's doing a lot without having to punch you in the face with it, because there's like a lot of emotion to it that, I mean, I think you can watch them over and over and get something new from each watch. Yep. So I think it's going to be really good to just watch it all together after it's done too, knowing how it's going to end. So I am going to be sad that it's going to end, but I'm really looking forward to where it's going.
But that brings a point that I wanted to make, because I don't know if it was yesterday or at some time during the weekend, like there was a review that was published on Insider. I forgot who wrote it, and frankly, I don't really want to know who, because that was the dumbest review I've ever read for WandaVision. But in that article, they were basically saying that WandaVision wasn't working because like it's not going anywhere quickly enough, and that this is all the sitcom thing is becoming gimmicky, and they're not revealing things, and it all just read like someone that was just too used to the binge formula where everything should work as a extended movie instead of like a series, which I think is one of the beautiful things that like WandaVision is doing, which is kind of bring back the way we used to watch TV, not even 10 years ago, which is like you sit your ass down, you wait for a week, and then you watch what's happening that week, and then you do it and repeat and do it again. So I had to get everyone's thoughts on that, like which, if maybe someone believes that the binge formula is better and like we just get like an extended movie instead of like episodic reveals, why don't we start with whoever wants to start about commenting about that?
Maybe I'm just like super old, but yeah, I remember like when Lost came out, when Heroes came out, like it would be, you know, whenever the episode ended, like my phone would ring and it would be one of my friends talking about it, theorize and talk about it like all week. We'd sit on the subway like talking about it on the way home from work, and like that I think is like the most fun part of watching TV, is like being able to connect with other people over it is really big for me. Maybe that writer doesn't do that, I don't know, but like like talking to my friends about what happened on The Mandalorian was like half the experience of watching The Mandalorian, you know, because every week we were like, what's going to happen next? Where's he going? Oh my God, we only have this many episodes left. Like, how are they going to wrap this up? And that's exactly how I feel now with like 2 more episodes of WandaVision to go. It's like, how are we going to finish this? And it's thrilling for me, and it's a bonding experience, and it's what fandom is all about, in my opinion. So I don't know, like maybe writing I quit entertainment journalism a long time ago, and maybe writing it has just gotten that much more, soulless. Couldn't do it. Couldn't give my opinions on things to people every week. I just got tired of it, so I just started telling my friends.
Yeah. Well, as somebody who actually does enjoy the binge watching thing, because I have zero patience, and I'm the kind of person that's like, no, I'm not going to be left in a cliffhanger. I want to know how it goes through. Me and my husband didn't watch The Mandalorian season 1 for a long time because we just didn't get Disney Plus. And then when we got it, we like binge watched season 1, in like a weekend. But then the thing about binge watching like that is then sometimes by the time you get to the end, you kind of forget what happened in the beginning because you watch it so fast that you don't really have time to digest what happens in every episode. So thank you to the podcast that when season 2 of Mandalorian came out, then we had to watch it because we were doing reviews of the episodes. And I enjoyed it so much more, even though I think maybe season 1 is still better. But I enjoyed the view experience so much more just because, I sat down every week and watched it with my husband, and then we would start texting, oh my God, did you watch it? And then, talking about how we were going to talk about it during the podcast was great. And then for WandaVision, since we originally said we weren't going to do episode to episode once, I was like, you know what? I'll just wait for it to end and watch it. But then I didn't end up doing that. We started watching it episodically too, and I've been enjoying it so much. I mean, when I watched this weekend's episode a little while ago, I was like, oh my God, what did I just watch? That was so good. How could they leave me with this cliffhanger? But you enjoy it so much more. You really do. You get so much more out of it watching that way. And now that you mention it, I do remember back in the day, Lost, Heroes, all these things. You had to sit down and wait, and you had a chance to comment and theorize about everything that was happened. And then obviously Lost and Heroes both had terrible last season.
Yeah. Specifically Heroes season 1 was what we were really excited about.
Yeah. And Lost season 1, that was fantastic. And then slowly but surely. But they had some really good beginnings there, and it was great to watch. The same with, the beginning of Game of Thrones. Not that last season.
Don't do it.
Last couple of seasons.
Yeah. But I think that was something that was missing, I think, because everybody after all the streaming services came around, and they would usually release like seasons together and stuff, but people became really accustomed to watching it that way. But I do love how they're doing it, and like moral of the week kind of thing, and but it still doesn't stagnate. I think there's always something going on. I think it's very entertaining how it's done. So I don't know. I think it's a stupid review. So. What do you think, Goose?
For me, it's kind of an easy thing to have an opinion on, because I always compare to Game of Thrones and Westworld and a bunch of like these shows that are weekly by nature. And like I recall enjoying those shows more in a global sense, because they were the water cooler shows, right? They were like, I got to work on Monday, and it was like me and my coworkers, we get our coffees or our waters or whatever, or breakfast, and we would have like, hey, bro, hey, did you watch it? Did you watch it? And then it's just like all week, just talking about, what do you think it's this? Do you think she's a robot? Is he a robot? What's happening? And so, which ties back to what you were saying, Nani, which is like, it actually makes you remember the episodes better, because you don't just consume them in an hour, you are consuming them for a week, because of like you're going through them and whatnot. Because as much as I love Stranger Things, like I binged it obviously when it came out, and the minute season 2 came out, I'm like, what the hell happened in season 1? I have no clue what happened. So like you either have to watch their recaps, which are actually pretty good, or sit down and watch the show again. And it's just like, okay, I'll watch it if I want to watch the show, but I don't want to have to watch the show to remember what happened. Which I think is kind of one of the issues with the binge method, that they delve so much into the just sit down and watch the whole thing as a movie, that at the end of the day, you consume so much of it that you couldn't digest what you consume. You just like regurgitate it immediately, and after a week, you're done with it. Now, it's actually interesting because before starting recording today, I was watching some analytics over Cobra Kai versus WandaVision, And Cobra Kai, after it came out, like people online were talking about it like all the time, but it died out after it had like a sharp decline in the engagement it had online immediately because of the binge method. And WandaVision has been consistent in its engagement online just because every week there's something new to talk about. So those are my 2 cents. Mo, what do you think?
I think, yeah. I think it's been what you also have said, that there's a beauty to waiting, it gets our minds machinating, gets our creative juices like, ooh, what's gonna happen next? Like, it's, I don't know. To me, that's always been kind of like how I've watched TV. Until Netflix. I think to me still the binging is like this, like the Netflix thing. Like, that once I'll binge whatever Netflix does, but that's because it's like their formula. Like, I don't think I think they're aware of it. Like, they don't go out of their way to make like a super memorable like middle. It's like, yeah, you get a good beginning, you get a sort of okay middle, and then a memorable ending, and then the same formula goes on again, because they know that you're gonna forget about what happens. Like, honestly, I liked what comes to mind is this show Lock and Key. Like,
I've heard. I haven't seen it, but I've heard.
I the comics are great. I also like the show, but it's like you just binged it, and then it's just not memorable. It's just like, oh, another show I just watched. Versus it's like, sit down, you wait for it, you're like, well, what's gonna happen next? What's like so many questions, and then next week's episode might answer some of them or make it worse, or so I don't know. There's but whoever whoever enjoys binging, all the power to them. Just wait for the episodes to end. It's not the end of the world. You just have to wait a few weeks.
Moving forward, though, we've kind of, I think, had a pretty complete discussion on WandaVision. So let's look into the future and look at where the MCU and Marvel as a whole are going. Obviously, COVID has kind of created some bumps along the road that might actually work better for them going forward. Who knows? But we know of a couple of projects. Obviously, Falcon and the Winter Soldier are the Disney Plus show that's coming out almost immediately after WandaVision. We're still waiting for Black Widow. Who knows if we'll ever see that movie? But besides that, we have Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, which I think we should discuss a little more, since Wanda's going to be a big part of it. And Sam Raimi is the director, which is kind of a big deal because Sam Raimi did the original Spider-Man movies for Sony. And then obviously, tagging off from that is Spider-Man 3, which there's like so many crazy rumors online that I have no idea if it's worth it to keep reading any of them, because at this point it's like, I don't know, let's just keep waiting. So I don't know if anyone had any thoughts about that, the future of the MCU. Catrina, why don't you give us kind of your thoughts on what's happening, what's coming out, and what's going to happen after the fact. Because you mentioned Young Avengers and stuff, so.
Yeah, I am really excited to see where they take the Multiverse of Madness, because I feel like there's going to be Falcon and the Winter Soldier, but this is going to be the connector between WandaVision and that movie. I think that's going to lead directly into what happens there and what we see there. And I'm not even thinking necessarily about who could come in from the multiverse or what the multiverse is, but like, again, with Billy and Tommy in WandaVision, when I hear multiverse and my brain goes Young Avengers, I think America Chavez is coming. So maybe I'm putting too much heart into that. I don't know if she's like officially cast in that one yet. But I am very, very excited to see what's going to happen because of these powers that, that Wanda has. And how Doctor Strange's powers will respond to them, because I assume that at some point they're going to like clash, and even like the fallout of what is happening right now in WandaVision. Like, are people going to develop powers from being in that town, and like how will it affect what happens in the multiverse of madness? But I will say that Falcon and the Winter Soldier kind of has a real tough act to follow. So I hope it's super good, because like this show is really blowing minds and stuff, and it's a very different show from what WandaVision is. And even though these are characters that we care about a whole lot, that have this big effect on the multiverse, it is a tough act to follow. So.
Yeah, they have set the bar really high with this show.
Well, what do you think about the upcoming slate for the MCU?
I kind of want that, want either Wanda or one of the kids to create a reality within that reality, and then everything, all hell breaks loose, because it stands to, like, if you can create a reality within a reality, which is arguably a fabricated reality, can you create like another hex within a hex? So I wanna, I'm envisioning kind of like the ending of WandaVision is gonna be kind of like the hex will collapse on itself, and then it'll just open up a hell of multiverses or something like that.
So it'll kind of like lead it directly into Doctor Strange, basically, the way you're saying it.
I think it will lead into Doctor Strange directly, or whatever those events will trigger Doctor Strange to get triggered. Whatever event, when
trigger
Katrina
warning.
said it, I can definitely see the fight, like the red against like the green beams, like clashing, and then like floating, then like both, like one is altering reality and the other's like altering time. That I can see that fight. Like,
is Doctor Strange coming out before or after Spider-Man?
I think it's before. But I will jump in really quick and talk about that multiple realities thing, because again, going back to Billy and America, Billy is known as the Demiurge in Marvel Comics, and I think it's really interesting because not only does that relate to how America's entire reality was created, it also relates possibly to what's going to happen in the Loki show if Billy stays around.
Right. Totally forgot about the Loki show.
yeah, that's another big one that's going to come up, and I have a feeling that like if they do this right, it is going to tie directly back to WandaVision and what happened in this show. So yeah.
So I don't, is the Loki show, is it based off the Loki that stole the stone?
Yep. Okay. That's what it looks like. We were watching Endgame over the weekend. Exactly that scene in Endgame when the space stone is knocked out of Tony's hand by the Hulk being angry about going down the stairs, and then that Loki goes and uses the space stone. I think that's the Loki from the show, basically.
So it's gonna be a Loki that's not aware of the events,
exactly,
of Ragnarok, and
he's only aware of Owen Wilson taking him to time travel prison. Wow. Yeah.
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 Sorry, I don't do a good Owen Wilson.
There are a lot of threads being woven right now, and I think they're a lot bigger than what we see, especially given like the broadness of Billy's powers in this one episode alone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which kind of like
just. I mean, then will Wanda become kind of like a Dark Phoenix too? Like that's.
I would not let anyone do Dark Phoenix anymore. They had 2 tries, and the second one I thought it could not be worse than the first one.
But it was.
Again, I'm wrong about all of my theories. the second Phoenix was
so
worse.
bad. It was so
but
bad.
with it's not with Disney's hands.
That's true. Good point. I will I would allow it. Yeah.
If the Fantastic Four can get like 52 million chances, I think the X-Men are allowed that too.
Yeah, no, especially with Kevin Feige not letting it suck.
Not letting it suck.
But now speaking about all this like multiverse stuff and like all the different crazy realms that the MCU wants to go in, or at least that they're implying that they're going to go in with the not just the movies but the Disney Plus shows and whatnot. That brings us like to the final part of this conversation, which I think it's kind of the double question of the big question of the night, right? Which is MCU and Star Wars. And it's like the two things that Star Wars can get from Marvel, because ever since we've seen the Disney era of Star Wars, we have seen that Marvelification, right? Of like how they're trying to do the interconnected storytelling through a bunch of different media, which is not new to Star Wars, and I don't even know how to explain how it's Marvelized. Probably we can discuss this here, but I think the important thing to ask about is like, what should Star Wars absolutely learn from what Marvel is doing, and what things should it absolutely ignore from Marvel? Because not everything translates one-to-one from one franchise to another. I don't know if anybody had any thoughts to kind of get this going.
Yeah, I think that the formula, especially with interconnected stories, could be a very big, important tool when it comes to bridging the gap between what happened in the original trilogy and where and how we got to the sequel trilogy. Because there's so much story that is just in books that I will read, of course, and like, you know, folks will read when we have the time, but like the broader fan base doesn't understand like the intensity of change that happened in between when the New Republic was founded to how the heck we get to the First Order. There's so much like, oh my God, if there were any way to make the book Bloodline into a miniseries, there would be so much explained about, you know, not just the state of the galaxy, but like how Kylo Ren got to where he was, and like why Leia is not seen as a respectable person in you know, in the galaxy that she saved, you know. She falls from grace in that book because of Darth Vader, and it ruins her life again. Like there's never a moment where Anakin Skywalker isn't ruining her life. And so I think that like there's so much, and that's just an example, you know, like there's so much story that like we finally grazed with The Mandalorian. We finally understood like, here's how the galaxy sees the Empire. Here's how someone from Tatooine understands this versus like Ahsoka Tano, who has been in this for so long. You know, and I think that being able to share those broader perspectives that we only get real hints at with like, you know, for example, how Rey and Finn's definition and knowledge of Han Solo was radically different, because they're from different places and they grew up differently and got different stories. So yeah, so I think that like that's the tool that this TV storytelling can really utilize, is like really explaining bare bones the experience of the people across the galaxy and the experience of our heroes in comparison. But yeah, crossover events.
Yeah.
Well, what do you think?
I think it.
No, go ahead, Nani. You were gonna say.
No. I kind of agree with that last statement, Katrina. Like the crossovers don't necessarily need them. They're gonna do them. I'm almost 100% sure they are. It's gonna depend how they're done. I really hope they do not do the same thing that they did with the second season of Mandalorian, to use it as like a vehicle to promote the other shows, taking away a little bit from the actual story. So I hope that they got that out of their system with Mandalorian season 2, and do not bring that again. Now that there's, you know, more than enough promotion. Like people already have Disney Plus. People are not gonna watch these shows. Like we're gonna watch them. Right. So I think now we can just let them be and focus on making those characters and those stories good. I mean, I think they should be good on their own. It's fantastic when it ties in and you get better storytelling throughout the galaxy, because the galaxy is so big that if you tie in certain themes, it works, but they should be good on their own as well. So that's like my 2 cents.
I think yeah, the whole interconnected stories, it works, but at the same time, I'm not a fan of its application to Star Wars because in Marvel, everything revolves arguably within Earth. Star Wars, you have a whole galaxy, and if we are on the same island, then we don't get to see each other that often. Imagine being in galaxies far, far away. Like
exactly.
Every, I want to kind of see like interconnected stories, but not very loosely based. Like this is happening in one corner of the galaxy, this might be happening in another corner, and they sort of relate because yes, they're still within the same system, and things will impact. But I don't want to see it be like, oh, everybody will meet again and it's Infinity War and everybody will fight together. Like
we'll team up at the end.
Let's team up at the end, and like that. Those type of things just I don't think will work for Star Wars inherently. It just I think the fact that it works for Marvel, it's also because it's been a comic and it's been established that people nobody dies, everybody can somehow come back. You can nothing is set in stone. Like whatever you can imagine can happen. Like Star Wars is a little bit more grounded in that sense. Like don't explore some bridge between worlds, explore maybe some time travel, but not make it we can change the whole reality because of how that's I would say that's not how the Force works, or at least it's been like so
to quote the illustrious Han Solo.
Yes.
No, I totally agree because like you said, Mo, Marvel, the MCU is based on comics, and comics were inherently structured differently to how Star Wars is structured. Star Wars was structured originally 3 movies. This is a story. We're done. We're done. Let's keep moving forward. And even with the expansion of the expanded universe, it was still all that literary stuff was contained within itself. And it's like these are the book stories. Then there's the animated stuff that like Ewok adventures or stuff like that live completely independent from everything. So obviously there's threads that tied everything together, but Star Wars was never about weaving all the stories together into like one massive story that leads into the one place. And I remember the moment that I realized that Star Wars was doing the Marvelification was like during Last Jedi and Solo when that came out, and they had like Han's dice, and they made a massive point about connecting the dice in both movies. And it's like, oh, this is this good luck charm from that movie that you saw for half a second in A New Hope that no one actually noticed was there, but now apparently it's this big deal that means so much in Solo. And suddenly Leia it's like, I was like, what? This ain't an Infinity Stone, bro. It's like, why do we need this cross? It like fell flat to me. And I was like, oh, because they're trying to do that Marvel thing. But I do like them, like what you mentioned, Catrina, having to flesh out some things that they haven't been fleshing out in live action. Because let's face it, most of the people that are watching Star Wars are just watching the theatrical stuff. So they kind of need to explain some things better. But the Star Wars storytelling kind of works best when it's doing its own thing independently with some fun connections like Mandalorian was doing in season 1, maybe not so much season 2, or comic books are doing a really good job, I think, of bringing some of the stories together. But it's a fine line about learn what lessons to kind of bring in and apply, because it's not the same.
Yeah, I have to agree with, like, I think the reason The Mandalorian works so much, and the reason we've gotten so many new fans, the reason like people's moms are watching this, is that Mando is a very good POV character. Like he's detached from everything that happened. He was too far away. He was with his Mando Coven. I don't know what it's called. So he never experienced that. Like he got the brunt of what happened in the Clone Wars, and then he was away from everything else because all the Mandalorians were away from everything else. Like they're all rebuilding their culture and stuff. And also to the point of like time travel and wiping the timeline and stuff. I think the big difference between the MCU and Star Wars is that the MCU's villains were these fantastical beings. They're all monsters. They're all aliens, other people from other places. The villains of Star Wars are fascists. Like they are based in reality. There are huge consequences to the outer galaxy with them, and just up and erasing time or like doing a do-over or this and that. It's a very fine line to walk. So while we do, of course, have the world between worlds that we saved Ahsoka from, it's not necessarily, and I say this as someone who really wants Asajj Ventress back, it's not necessarily something that like we can just pull people out of or change realities in, because the consequences to the people in the galaxy in Star Wars are very real. You know, you can't just say, oh, Darth Vader never existed, even though that'd be really great, I assume, like, you know, or the Emperor didn't exist or whatever. It would erase the impact and like the comparison to reality that George Lucas went for. And so that's something that I don't want to happen, obviously, in Star Wars. Like it's a very continuous, thorough line through its story. And I don't necessarily want like, you know, do-overs.
Yeah.
And we were talking like in a previous episode, I think it was we were talking with Maria from Sisters with Sabers. We were talking about the world between worlds. My way, I don't know if it was you or her or whoever, I don't remember. It was talking like the world between worlds was kind of like this Tesseract from Interstellar, where it's like you can go and reach out between space and time, but you can't actually like change what already happened. You just have to like play within the bounds of the consequences of the world you're already in, which I thought was a really interesting way to look at it. And it makes way more sense. And it's kind of a healthier way to look at it too, because then it, like this allows the dude bros that don't like Disney and the sequel trilogy to be like, see, they're already decanonizing the sequel trilogy because it's alternate timelines. It's a alternate realities. It's like, no, you just don't like women and minorities in Star Wars. Sorry.
There's a fine line between like having actual critique for the sequel trilogies and just being a jerk. So
exactly.
Yeah. Because the sequel trilogy had a lot of issues, but not necessarily what some people complain about were the main issues. But
there were girls in it. I don't like it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a black stormtrooper. What?
No.
It makes no sense. But yeah, I think what you were saying is right, Catrina. That you know, if you make it too fantastical, then you kind of diminish what the story was trying to do from the beginning. So they have to keep that in mind. So far, The Mandalorian has been great. It's had its issues also with season 2, but it is so good. The fact that, you know, The Mandalorian is completely lost. So anybody who comes in watching it that hasn't watched anything else will be just as lost as him. So it's not a big deal if you don't know everything that's come before.
That's the point of him being lost, because he is us, basically, right?
Yeah.
In that sense.
So I thought that was a fantastic decision to do it that way. So hopefully they will continue to bring out good content. I think there's a lot of things to look forward to in Star Wars as well going forward. So
absolutely.
Especially with the High Republic. I don't know if anybody has been reading any of it so far. I've only read Light of the Jedi, Into the Dark, and the Marvel comics. I haven't read the other comics, but so far it's been so much fun to kind of see this other side of the galaxy that's like different but same, but different in the most refreshing kind of way. I think is what Star Wars should kind of start going into, which was one of the things that I was quasi disappointed about during the Kathleen Kennedy presentation at D23. Was it when they were talking about all the products that were going out? There was only really one product, well, two products. Taika Waititi, we don't really know what it's about. So that one and the Acolyte are kind of the only projects that are the really weird ones that we don't know anything really about, because one was not described, and then the Acolyte, we know it's like the final days of the High Republic. Everything else is kind of like, well, comfort food. And I think WandaVision if there's one lesson that Star Wars can take from the MCU, is like, look at WandaVision, look at the weirdness and embrace it and just go into all those different directions.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. There's so much potential to get like super duper weird in Star Wars without, messing with the timeline or anything,
Yeah.
Because it's the Force. Whatever.
Yeah.
There are witches that have the Force.
Yeah. And there's so many ages in the Star Wars galaxy that haven't been talked about yet, that you can basically start from scratch and do whatever you want with them. And, it would be really cool, to focus on an era that was in the Skywalker era. So really looking forward, especially to the Acolyte, how they're going to pull that off. I think it's going to be fantastic.
I'm really excited about that because the person, I forgot her last name now, Leslie something.
Yeah, she did Russian Doll.
She did Russian Doll. It was I just finished rewatching Russian Doll, and it is such a good story. And I believe this is so good. And I believe this is the one where like it's supposed to be like a female lady led.
Leslie Headland.
Headland, thank you. Yes. I have another friend called Leslie Hunter, and I'm just like
almost there.
Yeah,
and it's supposed to be exploring more of the dark side and stuff, right? So I think that'll be really cool to see. So looking forward to that.
Yeah, depending on which group of my faves survives that long, we'll hopefully see some really cool High Republic characters that we're getting introduced to right now. Man, can I say something about the Acolyte that's been like on my mind forever, and I didn't it just hit me now? Okay.
Yes, please.
Super nerdy book stuff. But when Keith Trennis was introduced, I remembered Yoda in Dooku Jedi Lost saying that Master Trennis, that was a really big it was so sad or like a tragedy or something. So I was immediately oh no. I don't know if they're the same person, but and that made me think about who is the Acolyte, and is the Acolyte Keith?
No, don't say that. See, that's what's been so good about High Republic so far, is that all the lead characters in all the books are so compelling and so much fun right now, and they're all dealing with such such good storytelling around them. It's a good era. It doesn't feel like it's beholden to since it's not, because it's in the past, right? It's not beholden to any tie-ins, which is when Star Wars is weaker. It's like when it's doing the Marvel tie-in type of thing, as we were talking before. Yeah. Because I remember reading Thrawn Treason, and I'm a big Thrawn person. But when I read Thrawn Treason, I was like, come on, this is too corporate-y, synergy thing, rebels, we gotta tie things together. And you could even feel that the author was, Timothy Zahn, didn't feel like he was there 100%. But then you give him Chaos Rising, where he's in the unknown regions and in the past, and he doesn't have to tie it. Well, there's some times, which I won't spoil for anyone who hasn't read it, but it's super, super lively, and it feels fresh because it feels like you're not chained down to the Marvelification of the universe. And that's what's good about the High Republic. But now you said that about Dooku Lost, I think you might be right, because I think Dooku Lost was Cavan Scott, right? And he's also one of the big players in the High Republic. So
yeah, he is writing basically all the storylines that Keith is in charge of. So I may have just scared myself a little bit there, but somebody at Lucasfilm owes me a drink if I'm right, because I'm gonna need it.
Oh yeah. No, it's like I just saw, I was reading Into the Dark, and then I saw, because Lucasfilm was releasing a couple of weekly videos about some of the characters or groups that are from the High Republic, and then they released the video from the Drengier. And all of a sudden, when you look at the space station from Into the Dark, all of a sudden, someone pointed out online, because I didn't remember it, even though I did read it, they pointed out the space station that Snoke was in when Kylo Ren went to visit Snoke after the temple. And it's the same space station from the High Republic. I'm like, you guys were planting those seeds for years. This is like 3 or 4 years now that you've been doing this. So see, that's good, subtle interconnectivity that doesn't get in the way of storytelling.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm really worried about that for the rest of my life now. Okay, sorry.
that makes it compelling, though. If you're worried about it, it means that they're building characters right that you care about.
Yeah, definitely.
As opposed to some other characters that they can be fired.
Exactly. Oh my God. How do you drop a bag that big?
I wouldn't mind though a recast with Lucy Lawless. That's all I'm gonna say about the subject.
Yeah, I've been campaigning for Lucy Lawless for a while, though I have some friends who have brought up some really good points about Kara having like an unconventional body and look that Lucy doesn't necessarily have. So I'm very open to a Cara Dune recast because I loved her. And I feel like with a better actress and a better person, she could really be one hell of a character. I don't like that she became a cop, but well,
Yeah, that's Raiders of the New Republic plugin. It was so. I mean, I don't want to talk about it too much because what hasn't been said about this online, but it was so weird because ever since Kara was introduced, all the Star Wars bigots, because there's no other word for them, were super anti Cara Dune and whoever portrayed her. And they were like, this is SJW, liberal agenda from Lucasfilm, Kathleen Kennedy pushing her feminist crap on us. So like, they don't even like her. Yeah. And now all of a sudden, because she has a interesting rhetoric that kind of goes against the ethos of Star Wars, now she's like #1 ally for them. I just found the biggest case of cognitive dissonance that I've ever seen in social media at this point. But
it's so stupid, and it's just like it feels weird because it's like all these bigots are coming out and basically screaming into the ether that they've never watched or understood a Star Wars film. Like I remember a particular bigot who was like, oh, Star Wars has only had a princess, a Jedi, and a damsel, and now Cara is this representative.
Oh, like, I know which bigot you're talking about. He's from Texas.
Yeah. Go in your oily little chair on the Senate and like shut up, because like clearly you don't know Star Wars and you shouldn't be speaking on these things. You just sound stupid. Like,
well, he's someone that likes movies and always likes to reference movies in his tweets, but every time he does that, it's like, bro, you missed the point of the movie. Clearly,
did you watch this movie or did you read the Wikipedia article 5 minutes ago?
Which is unfortunate.
Yep, and completely actively miss the point of Star Wars.
Exactly. Well, that's because Star Wars isn't a story about them winning. So.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's like when you identify with the bad guys, or you actually name your little group of people after the bad guys of the movie, maybe you should reevaluate what side you're on. Because spoiler alert, it's not the good guys.
That just reminds me of that one British show where like one what is it? They're Nazis or something. One of them turns the other and goes like, "Are we the baddies?"
Oh yeah, I've seen that clip.
Yeah,
I've seen that. I don't know what show it's from, but I've seen the clip. It's like, oh, the bad guys here.
We.
So
clueless
about that.
But with that, I think we hit like a lot of the main points of discussion that we wanted to talk about. So again, thank you, Catrina, for joining us. As a refresher for everybody that is listening to us, why don't you let us know where everyone can find you so they can follow you on social medias and listen to you. So why don't you drop those links verbally now, and then we'll put them on the description.
Yes. First, thank you all for having me. I'm so excited to talk to you, and this was a really, really fun conversation. So thanks again.
This was really fun. Yeah.
And yeah, you guys can find me anywhere on the internet if you search for Catrina, OHCatrina. My podcasts are Bantha También, which is Bantha Pod on Twitter, and PascalPod, which is Pod Pascal on Twitter. And yeah, you guys can tune into all my stuff, and there are probably a lot of other things I should be promoting right now that I just cannot remember, but I'm sure they'll be on my Twitter feed at some point or another.
Thank you.
So thank you so much for coming and joining us. Love to talk to people about everything nerddom, and WandaVision is so good right now. In Star Wars, we've been a fan of forever, so it's really good to, really. But yeah, it was really fun. And we are the Triad of the Force. You can find us at Triad of the Force on Twitter, anywhere podcasts are found. We're also on YouTube. We don't have the hyperlink yet, but we'll get there somewhere. And just,
we just need 15. Just give us 15 and we'll get our own link on YouTube.
I will promote.
Thank you.
Thank you.
But just, like us, comment, let us know what's going on or what else you want us to be talking about as well. So I think with that, have a good day and may the Force be with you.
And happy Valentine's Day, because every day is Valentine's Day.
You're all my Valentine. I've taken you.